Which obscure cartoon character do you really like? Calamity Jane from the late 90s cartoon The Legend of Calamity Jane. Only 3 episodes out of 13 were aired in the US, then got cancelled and pulled off air, and by a long time it was only partially available on YouTube. 2 episodes were missing thanks to a Canadian guy who found them recorded on VHS. A shame because it was a damn good cartoon with a badass female lead. There was one in the mid-late 1990s where the protagonist was an artist obsessed with chocolate bunnies. It was dystopian. I've never been able to find shit on it. It was on before Ninja Turtles. Honestly, I don't like the character, he was shitty, but I really want to know what the fuck the deal was. I think he had a bowl cut and his outfit was black and yellow. Samurai pizza cats were a staple of my childhood. Specifically, the B-Team that were occasionally called to save the main trio. A theme song that made me predisposed to loving the B-52s. Also, one of the characters was named Guido Anchovy, just in case you needed some light 90s anti-Italian racism. The chick animated is a goldmine for this question. American Made, Elseed, The Human Cannonball Fire Me, Boy and so on. I loved the complete lack of chemistry between the cowardly, inept, and lonely Dare Fledermaus and the efficient, overworked, uninterested American Made, Claude Cat. When the 2 mice try to convince him that he is other animals so he will fight the dog. I know I'm a lion, but that dumb pelican thinks he's a dog. Spike and Chester the dogs. When Chester suggests things to do and Spike backhands him and says nay, creepy from growing up creepy. No one ever seems to remember the Discovery Kids shows from the early 2000s and Creepy was my literal favorite. Her spooky goth character design and her family of bugs just really piqued my interest. Shame it only got 1 season. Kuroro Gunsu English title Sergeant Frog. It was big in Japan and Italy, but I lived outside of those countries and never came across anyone who even heard of it, including online. Great show, amazing humor, and some episodes can be quite educational. Tom Slick, and his mechanic, Gertie Growler. The Sunday morning cartoons on KTLA here in Los Angeles were so good that's when we got the Rocky and Bullwinkle show and all of the sub-cartoons, for which Tom Slick was one, and the Popeye show. Fractured Fairy Tales of Rocky and Bullwinkle theme, the first really adult cartoons example. Sleeping Beauty Lando Solidas was biz. Why wake her up when you can make more money trying to figure out how much she sleeps? Bed. Old School Fred from Super Chicken, he knew the job was dangerous when he took it. This Century Fillmore from Fillmore Gun Police procedural in a high school setting. Editing Duck from Peep at the Big Wide World. Jay Sherman from The Critic. Early 90s only got a season and a half. This was one of the shows at the forefront of cartoons for adults. It had a prime time spot and everything. Just a little ahead of its time. Slowpoke Rodriguez and the Crows from Speedy Gonzales. I know it is racist now, but growing up as a kid I didn't think anything of it. They're in Mexico, it's hot in Mexico so they don't do much was my thinking. Rick from the show Rick and Morty. It's like really underground, don't expect anyone else to know it, and if they did, it's a really intellectual show and real smart people like myself would understand. Adamant. I always saw him pop up in mini ad sequences for other cartoons, but actual episodes rarely ever played from what I remember back when we first got cable with Cartoon Network. Such a fun one. Not really the character, but every few weeks I'll get the theme song from the Wacky World of Tex Avery stuck in my head. I used to watch it before school when I was like 7 and woke up ungodly early. Coach McGurk from Home Movies, an early, surly predecessor of Bob Belcher. Or Jason Panopoulos. Also voiced by H. John Benjamin. The same voice is used for a few nerdy kids in Bob's Burgers now. These are not obscure if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, but more obscure now. Speedy Gonzales, that mouse was awesome. Also, the cyborg duck on DuckTales. He did not get enough screen time. I like the old school electricity character with knives. He is like an old OSHA warning or public service thing. Or something like that. The stickers and signs are funny. Not a cartoon, but video game. Just got to play Ace Attorney on Steam and I immediately fell in love with Loda Hart, the Southern cryptozoologist paranormal investigator paparazzi. Anybody else remember Go Go Gophers? Annie, the girl that formed from Clayface and was almost saved by Tim Drake. I drew them a while back. Does Crossing Swords count, being that it's stop motion animation? I know it's on Hulu, but when talking to friends or family, no one has heard of it or watched it. A villain called Arms Akimbo has always stuck in my head. He stood in this posture so long his arms locked in position, so he has to hit people with his elbows. I like Jerry's incredibly strong uncle. It's funny messes up Tom, but even funnier that Jerry seems intimidated as well. Lots of great facial animation work. I idolized Penelope Pitstop from Wacky Races as a child. She exhibited such equanimity, and her impeccable fashion makeup is something I attempted to emulate. From the cartoon Real Monsters, the character Ickis, he to scare people, inflates to a very large size, bigger than a house can, if necessary. I don't know if the SWAT cats are considered obscure or not, but I remember wishing I could have been buds with Razor and T-Bone growing up. Lol. Duckman was pretty good. Voiced by Jason Alexander. George Costanza. When USA Network was trying to break into the 90s adult cartoon hype, Marsupilami, Andy, and Kevin French, Pickles Oblong, Rick, and Steve, and of course Dr. Roxo the rock and roll clown. He does cooking. I always really liked Space Ghost and Birdman before Adult Swim made those other shows with them. I also really liked the Herculoids. Red Death from Venture Brothers has the best voice and some of the best dialogue in any animated show ever. A Clancy Brown performance. In 1986 there was a short-lived show called Kissifer. I really enjoyed that show as a kid. If you aren't from the UK, then absolutely Danger Mouse. But if you are, he ain't obscure, just a straight-up legendary hero. Dr. Embryo Crash Bandicoot stands rise up, celebratory hands in the air. He invented Slinkies and wrote the Bible. He's basically already won this thread, Jot. At least my brain has me convinced that when I was a very wee little child that there was a cartoon of Jot, the Dot, Kurtik, the little mole from Czechia, especially their trip to the sea in a rocket. Wow! Scrolled all the way down and see No Love for Underdog, Great Ape, or even Speed Buggy Room Zoom Zoom. My favorites when I was a kid were the Shmoo and Hong Kong Phooey, though I really liked Captain Caveman too. Tico from Around the World with Woolly Fog. Just wants to eat food every country he's in, and I respect that. For some reason Sledgehammer Opossum always stuck in my head, having seen the character once in the mid-90s.